Doom vivamos vivamos Epicureans. This is the BCE Comics Pod one-shot edition. I'm your host, Nick Smith, and I'm joined by...
Stojr from Stojr Shelf. How's it going, Nick?
I'm doing well, particularly since we are participating in Kurtis Findlay's Epic Marvel Podcast Reading Club, and this one-shot is going to be our brief thoughts on today's issue, which is Uncanny X-Men, number 172, Scarlet in Glory. Alright, so we're getting back to the regular Uncanny X-Men book now, which means we're also back to our regular creative team. That includes Chris Claremont on writing, Paul Smith on pencils, and Bob Viacek on inks. Alright, so the X-Men arrive in Japan to celebrate Wolverine's wedding to Mariko. However, her father's legacy as a crime lord is not yet leaving them alone. The Silver Samurai and Viper, who both recently attacked the New Mutants, now attack the X-Men to separate Mariko from them, to threaten her to give up leadership of the Yashida clan to her half-brother, the Silver Samurai. Well, Viper poisons the X-Men, but Storm manages to avoid the poisoning. As such, she was able to follow Mariko, and with the help of the assassin Yukio, they defeat Viper and the Samurai. But Storm seems to have trouble controlling her powers, and a lightning bolt destroys the warehouse where they face the villains, and that leads to a vision of the Phoenix. Alright, Stojr, what are your thoughts here?
I really enjoyed this issue, and there's a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in this. I had this in some of the old trade that I showed in one of our previous episodes. I think the From the Ashes trade. I'll fish it out while you're talking, so as to not delay things. I think the Paul Smith art is completely on point here. One thing that I noticed, maybe because I was flipping through the bonus materials with the Marvel Handbook, is they have like some height and weight differences for the X-Men in here. And on the first page here, where they're getting, they're coming through the airport terminal or greeting Wolverine wherever they're at, just walking into the apartment, how just tall Colossus is, right? Like he's 6'6" without his armored form. And Paul, followed the handbook here, right? Like he looks noticeably taller than everybody else. I thought that was interesting, and not to bury the lead, but I did not read all of the handbook material. I love that it's there, but I like it more as a reference to flip through things. And we can talk more about that when we get to the end of this. I love how well this connects to the Wolverine miniseries, but doesn't necessarily make you feel like you missed a lot if you didn't collect that, right? Like there's something happened. They kind of touch on that throughout this next couple of issues and catch you up, but it doesn't feel like there's some giant thing that you missed out on. And part of that is because they have Yukio and Storm develop a relationship here and interact. So you're kind of introduced to this new character through somebody new, and it's not like, oh yeah, Wolverine already knows her or whatever, right? There's a different setup here with those characters. I would assume Viper's an established character by this point in time, but it's the first time we've seen her. She looks pretty cool. It's always been, always been an interesting character. There's a funny joke in Bendis's Avengers Disassembled where Hawkeye's talking about Viper as one of his hall passes or something like that, and he's just like, yeah, I got a thing for people for girls in green, and he kind of looks over at She-Hulk when he says that. So always makes me think of that. I appreciate rather the character development that we have here with Scott and Alex. Alex is the literal forgotten child in this book, right? And you can word that as like he's kind of off living the dream of having a family and doing his thing. But we've been following the X-Men here for 70, 80 issues or something like that, and Alex has had very little to do other than being a background character, and sort of having him and Scott interact here is pretty solid. Silver Samurai stuff is always great. He's an interesting villain. I think Storm looks a lot like Binary on that second to last page, or whatever, not second to last, but on page 273 when the lightning strike happens. When you just flip through the book, I thought that was Carol for some reason. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty solid issue. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of what you're saying. Definitely glad that the Wolverine miniseries is in here. I think I would have struggled to follow some of this had that not been in there. Suddenly Wolverine's getting married, so that would have been a bit strange. But yeah, it sets everything up well. I know there'd been a lot of questioning as to why the Wolverine miniseries wasn't included in the first volume of Wolverine's Epic collection. And while it would make sense to still have that in there, it also makes perfect sense that it's here. We need that background material to kind of set up this story, right? And I think Paul Smith's art continues to be really great here. At first, I kind of felt like we were getting a continuation of Frank Miller a little bit at the start of this book, and let me show you what I mean by that. I've got the comic viewer up here. Let me go back to the start of this this issue. All right, now, let me also say, as I'm saying this, I do not have the original issue of this, so what I'm about to say is kind of speculation, all right? Based on how it's laid out here in the Epic collection. There was a double-page spread, or what I assumed would be a double-page spread, that I thought was reminiscent of some of the things Miller did, but our volume breaks it because of how they're put in the Epic collections, right? Okay, so we have the cover of this issue on the right-hand side, right? That's totally normal. That's how it would be in a comic. The inside cover is typically an advertisement, though. And of course, we don't get the advertisements in our Epic collection. So instead, the inside of the cover is the first page of the comic. Usually this is a splash page, but we don't really have that here. So then the next page, pages 2 and 3, they would be on the other side of the splash page, but they get split up into two separate ones here, right? So I think what that does is you see on page 257 of the Epic collection, you've got Mariko standing there, but then 258, you've got Rogue standing there in the vertical box. And I think in the normal issue, those would have been next to one another as kind of a double page spread, right? Wait.
Yeah, so
what have you got there?
So this is my From the Ashes collection. They don't put the covers in this collection. So the covers are like at the end. So I don't know if that's a coincidence. And while you're talking and giving the rest of your review, I'll look up on Marvel Unlimited. I might have this issue in the basement. I don't remember. But I'll look up on Marvel Unlimited for what the original was. But just wanted to show that real quick for you.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's pretty much just it. I think with them not being facing one another on kind of a double page spread, I think it kind of takes away from that mirror image of Mariko and Rogue in what would be the gutter of the book, the middle of the book. But the mirroring of the two, kind of both of them being the new outsiders to the X-Men and so forth, but in different ways and with different feelings towards both of them. That coupled with the intentional white space on the page, I felt like that was very similar to some of the stuff we saw Frank Miller doing. So anyway, that was just
a quick Marvel Unlimited. You can't tell. They don't have it listed as a double page spread, so it doesn't open up as one page. Mm-hmm. But you can't. But there's no page order there. They're all right one after the other. So you wouldn't see them next to each other regardless. So
yeah, I mean, it definitely is not meant to be read as a double page spread, but I feel like the layout was intentional to try to make those two next to one another.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, that's my only thoughts there. Good stuff. Looking forward to where we go next. Stojr, any other final thoughts?
No, I'm good. Looking forward to the next issue. It's kind of a couple issues in like a story arc here about with the X-Men in Japan. So this is just part one of a couple here. I think 2 or 3.
Okay. Well, if you guys have enjoyed our thoughts, again, follow us on YouTube. We're going to read, rate, and review a full big collected edition comic once a month, plus these daily one-shots. So thank you for watching, following, liking, all of that stuff. All right, we'll see you guys next time.